good. Let's go. And another evening begins, yes. I'm FiOS 1 News meteorologist Joe Cioffi for New Jersey and Long Island.
And for the Lower Hudson Valley, the news, the FiOS 1 Lower Hudson Valley forecast.
I did it backwards. No, I did it backwards. We both got confused.
FiOS
1 News, Hudson Valley.
Hudson Valley
Lower
Hudson
Valley. Joe Rao.
Thank you.
Okay,
Joe
now
Cioffi,
that
New Jersey and also for Long Island.
Right, and let's jump right into this, Joe. We've got pretty interesting. The hurricane season wise, we were talking about the fact that maybe this will be a year where you'll see less coming out of the tropics and maybe a bit more coming out of the subtropics. And we had Chris this week, and also we've had 2 hurricanes now and 3 named storms. We're only at July 11th, and my understanding is the average time where we get to the 2nd or 3rd hurricane or the 3rd named storm is usually sometime in the middle part of August or the latter part of August.
This may be
we're ahead of the, we're above normal here.
We're above normal now, but I have a suspicion that whereas usually July is a slow month, and all of a sudden now we have our 3rd named storm. I just have a suspicion that when we get to August, which normally is when we see everything start revving up, that there may be a bit of a slowdown. I don't know why I'm thinking about that, but
there are a few factors that might argue in that favor with respect to the long range. We could even show what's going on the satellite now that may have some impact. But why don't I bring that up and we can continue on this theme that we're on.
It's very, very unusual because we had such a gorgeous weekend, especially last Saturday when we had very low dew point temperatures, and here we are less than a week later, and we're talking about maybe a somewhat similar day coming up on Thursday.
Right. Now here's Chris, which starts off from earlier today. You can see a fairly well-defined eye, but it now is north of the northernmost wall of the Gulf Stream, so it's probably going to start to weaken and make that transition over into a post-tropical or extratropical system. And you can see also with respect to our coastline, rip currents, waves, and so on going to be problematic at the beaches again on Thursday. But other than that, Joe, I think we're going to have a fairly decent next couple of days.
Right, and
here's the wide view, by the way.
And Chris managed to get up to a Category 2 briefly during the 11 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, 100-mile-per-hour winds, but that very quickly got knocked down as Chris began to interact with somewhat chillier water. It's now down to, I believe, what, 80?
85 or 90, maybe.
85, 90. It's back to a Category 1.
The bottom line is that this is headed for eastern Newfoundland and then out into the open waters of the Atlantic. And this loop kind of got stuck, so I'll just reload it. Here's how it looks on the bigger picture.
Right.
You can see the remnants of Beryl, a lot of thunderstorms flaring up across the Bahamas and then eastward from there, but for now it's very disorganized, and part of the reason is you're getting a lot of shear here with the outflow from Chris. It's still fairly close, and clouds, thunderstorm tops are getting blown all over the place. Couple of things to note, Joe, and just going back on the idea of the activity. I'll bring this a little further south. First off, all this is all African dust,
right,
in that brownish shade. The other thing to look at, you see that spinning, that's out there in the Atlantic.
Right.
That's a cold upper low that's there. And in fact, if we go just a little bit wider, you can see this enormous upper low that's way out in the eastern Atlantic. That is going to create hostile wind conditions across the tropical Atlantic until those upper lows resolve themselves one way or another.
Right.
And so while they're there, I would suspect that any tropical waves that come off the African coast are probably going to get ripped apart, or at least kept very weak until they get away from those upper lows. They're quite formidable.
The meteorological equivalent of a giant shredder, so to speak.
Yeah.
And Beryl, I think I saw earlier today the Hurricane Center only giving a 20% chance of it making a recovery.
About 50% in the next 5 days.
Oh, all right.
Right. 20% in the next 48 hours, which makes sense. But after later, beginning later tomorrow, and more than likely Friday into the weekend, it is going to be in a bit more of a conducive environment. How much of it comes back, I don't know. And even if it does, it looks to be like it would be just an offshore issue anyhow.
Yeah, so, but the only thing that would do relative to us would be for folks who are, beachgoers.
Yeah, maybe more waves.
It will probably just continue what Chris has already started with in terms of rip currents.
Yeah, I want to go to the long range. I don't usually look at these teleconnections, but I been looking at what the models have been doing in the longer term. So let me take a look at these teleconnections, and a couple of things caught my eye, Joe. Here, first of all, that the positive Pacific North America index, ridge in the west, trough in the east. The NAO is neutral to negative right through, but the Eastern Pacific oscillation goes, for this time of year, goes pretty strongly negative.
Wow.
So this is probably one of the reasons why you pointed out the long range folks are talking about below normal temperatures. Right. The teleconnections are certainly pointing to the idea that we're going to continue to have these troughs in the eastern part of the U.S. There might be some minor interruption along the way where you get the occasional hot day or two, but on the whole, we're going to keep seeing, as we've been saying, these fronts coming through every couple of days. And my other takeaway from this, we can actually bring it up. I'll bring up the upper air. My other takeaway on this is that if the trough is going to be in the east and stays in the east, then we have to kind of at least consider the fact that if there's a tropical system out there, and if there's a trough in the east and that trough is in the wrong place, it could be problematic. It also, to me, kind of speaks to the idea that maybe this hurricane season may have more of an Atlantic East Coast influence,
right,
as opposed to last year where everything was basically in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
I'm thinking, the clues are here right now that this may be more of an Atlantic season than a Gulf or Caribbean season.
So what we saw today with Chris, for example, might just be the opening act, so to speak, of maybe more than a few storms that will be somewhere along the eastern seaboard and will be worth watching. Of course, we don't want this to be a situation like what we had in 2012, where
right,
we had an unusual NAO, a big block that took place over Greenland or the northern part of Canada, which forced Sandy to go up and then suddenly get forced to the left or inland into New Jersey. Most of the time, more often than not, what we just simply see are storms, either tropical or non-tropical storms, just moving along the eastern seaboard or parallel to the eastern seaboard, and it'll make for an interesting time if that indeed does evolve, let's say later on in August or September, around the time of the traditional peak of the hurricane season. But again, also, if we do get those shots of unseasonably cool weather just spilling out of central and northern Canada into the eastern United States with the trough there, it could also just as well mean what we saw with Chris, which
right.
is a system.
Well, it would all depend on where the trough. So where's the trough going to be? Is it right along the coast? Is it at 80 west or 85 west or even 90 west? Here's the jet stream for the middle of next week. I mean, that's a trough goes pretty far to the south. The westerlies go all the way down into almost to northern Florida, and you got a pretty decent flow here that's coming. With Canada feeding systems down and from time to time, with weather fronts coming on through. This is not an upper air that speaks heat at all.
Right.
Again, other than you get the odd day or two here and there ahead of the cold fronts where it will have to warm up. But this would say that once the fronts go by, we get a shot of cooler, drier air behind it. That pattern to me continues. In fact, if we take this out to the whole long range, you can see the trough is pretty much in the east and wants to stay there. So I don't know if we hold on to something like this as we go into August and early September, it's going to have. I think it's going to have some implications with regards to maybe we may finally have you'll get these cold, cooler intrusions during the month of August,
Right.
and perhaps the fall might be different for a change instead of having these extended summers into mid-October like we've had in the past number of years.
I remember in the 70s, it seemed like every year it sometimes would come in early August, sometimes in late August or whatever, but there was always the first real preview of the fall season,
right,
with an outbreak of unseasonably cool weather that just
in like mid to
in.
late August. It would always happen. I remember it too.
And it has not happened in a while. As you just pointed out, we've had instead spells of unseasonable warmth, an extended Indian summer that takes us all the way into November.
Right.
And the first snowfall comes and there's still leaves on the trees.
Which is what happened last year.
Right.
All right, so just real quick, we could just, Chris is gone here. Weather the next couple of days really looks good overall. And then I think it turns a little more humid over the weekend. Maybe we throw in the chance that there could be a thunderstorm perhaps on later Sunday afternoon in one or two spots. The next important cold front to me doesn't look like it's till late Tuesday, and then at least right now the GFS is showing it to be rather potent. But I would just caution here, because every time it does this in the long range, as soon as we get into the short range lately, the boilerplate comes on and we wind up with nothing.
Right.
So let's just bear that in mind. And then high goes in, goes out, another front, high goes in, goes out, and now we're into almost the end of July. So it's very interesting that to me, I certainly heat waves are off the table until we get that ridge back in the east, and there's no sign of that happening.
Yeah, and I think it was the summer of 2013 that I made reference to the fact that it was the Garden of Eden summer, in the fact that we had a lot of shots of cool air, never really saw all that much in terms of heat. Now this is a different type of summer season. We are seeing.
It does feel different to me. I agree with you on that. The whole weather picture feels different than in the past number of summers that we've experienced.
I mean, that 2013 summer, as I said, I don't think we had more than 1 or 2 90-degree days. At least I remember in the Hudson Valley. And this year, of course, we certainly have had our fair share of 90-degree days, but still they have been tempered by periods of, well, like case in point tomorrow, beautiful weather. I mean, sometimes you get these summers where you get this endless siege of heat and humidity, and once in a great while you'll get a little bit of a break. But we've had our share of heat, and we've also had our share of great weather, and tomorrow is going to be a case in point again.
Bob Wilson says he's taking his attention away from the Mets game to be with the two of us and stay awake.
The last I saw, the Mets and the Phils were tied 0-0. The Mets were doing their usual support of Jacob deGrom by not giving him any runs. He pitches beautifully, and what happens? The Mets don't do a darn thing. So I don't even want to know what happened. The illusion is that the Phillies have done something, so I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah. Jean Marie Gillespie wants to know, it's been breezy the last couple of days. Do we owe that to Chris?
I don't think
so.
No.
I don't think so.
We just had this.
The gradient's been a little tighter than it usually is, the pressure gradient.
Right.
But I think it would be minimal impact. Maybe more the heating and the mixing that's been going on because of how cool the air has been aloft.
Right.
Just for Marilyn, Carol is under the illusion that a storm is coming. I don't know where she got that. Marilyn, there is no storm. If we're talking about Chris, it's going to Newfoundland, so you'd have to take a plane over to St. John's to experience it, but no, not happening. Jean Marie Gillespie caught a walleye. Nice. I've yet to catch one, but that's on my list. My buddy Mike Panici is back after his wonderful vacation. It's good to see Mike home, so now he and I can go fishing. Just trying to see. Frank Lysandra likes those cold fronts to keep them coming. And Michael Odell has already said that summer is over.
It seems like this summer's really rolling along. We have some stuff at my house that we have to take care of, fix a few things outside or whatever. And I mentioned to my wife this morning, I said, you look at the calendar, we're already halfway through July. So
I know. Well, think about it, Joe. The next 3 weeks are climatologically where the temperatures peak.
Right.
So just like where they bottom in the last 2 weeks of January, first week of February, they top out in the last 2 weeks of July, first week of August, and then we begin the slow descent, and then it starts to accelerate in September. Yeah, we're about meteorologically the meteorological summer, June,
Right.
July, August, we're almost halfway through.
The 21st of May to the 21st of July. We talk about the summer solstice being the date of the longest amount of daylight, and when the sun reaches that point, it's not like a mountain. It doesn't sharply arrive there and then sharply drop down. There's an easing into that longest period of daylight from May to June, and then we slowly begin to descend. And I think, the mornings, if you've been up early, the sun has been coming up early these last several weeks or whatever, and going down late, after 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:20. But I think once we get past the 21st of July, that's when you start to notice, hey, it wasn't,
Right.
all of a sudden, you go outside at 8 o'clock, hey, look, it's dark already. It's getting dark already.
And it starts to chip
And
away.
the mornings are not so light anymore. So we're reaching that point. Another 10 days or so. I might also point out for all of you who are watching in the tri-state New York area, if you want to get your excitement, tomorrow and Friday, the 2 final days of the year for the Manhattan Henge phenomenon.
Yes.
Where the setting sun shines through the cross streets of New York. I personally, Joe, have never really found that to be... I mean, it's like people go crazy.
Yeah.
People put their lives on the line by standing in the middle of a cross street with the traffic
Well,
coming
Joe, I worked at 42nd and 2nd at Pix for a number of years. I got to see it every year.
Yeah.
But I had a huge advantage because you just go up into Tudor City.
Right.
There's an overpass there that crosses over
Right.
where there's a park, and you're basically over 42nd Street, so you're above the traffic.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's gotten so popular that everybody's figured that out. Yeah, it is kind of crazy.
It's
You're
crazy.
walking into taxi cabs to see this.
Yeah, it was Neil deGrasse Tyson at the Hayden Planetarium who first pointed this out back around 2000, and once he mentioned that, everybody went crazy. I mean, occasionally I would notice it, in the 70s and 80s, and I said, oh, that's interesting that the sun is shining through the cross street. Now it's like a phenomenon. Now. It's crazy. So,
and it happens in the wintertime in the opposite direction, but who wants to stand out in the cold?
Well, it happens in the winter, I think, in late
November and early January,
or
something
whatever
like that.
But the problem is that you have a free and clear view all the way out to the horizon. You're looking toward the Palisades of New Jersey.
Right.
But when you're trying to look in the other direction, you're getting blocked by the...
Right, you're looking at the old Pepsi sign that's out there.
Exactly.
Really fast. Nicky Henn, my buddy Nicky Henn, who just moved out to Arizona at a time. Joe, I'm just going to bring this up real quick because I did want to mention this. Watch this. This is the radar right now. Let me bring it up full so
we're getting into the
can
monsoon
see.
season, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So, Nikki, wait a minute. Let's make sure you can see this. Hang on one second. I gotta switch sources.
See, a lot of people here in the New York area.
That is southern. There's there's flood watches and flash flood warnings up all over the place here tonight because of all these thunderstorms.
This is a common thing at this time of the year, the monsoon season. They get these very localized, very heavy showers and storms across parts of Southern California, Arizona, New Mexico, into portions of Colorado. It happens every year. I mean, people think of the desert Southwest, and you think of Death Valley, and
right.
Not
the one difference is though. Out there, because the ground is basically baked like cement, everything runs off, so they get a half an inch of rain and it all runs off, and you wind up with flash flooding from rain that here wouldn't do very much of anything at all,
right?
Except make a few puddles here and there.
And before the monsoon season sets in, sometimes you get these now what do they call them, hoodoos or the dust storms?
Oh yeah, they were talking about it. Yeah, it was just some funny name that I had never heard of.
Now,
by the way,
we're used to flash flood.
We call them dust devils.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that we're used to like flash flood advisories or heat advisories or winter storm warning. Out there, they have blowing dust advisories. Right. And I've driven.
Listen, if they want blowing dust, they can come into my house and flip on the ceiling fan.
I've driven from Los Angeles to Phoenix. And I've actually driven through one of those dust storms.
I did a drive like that once. Yeah,
it ain't fun.
It ain't fun. Listen, we got to go. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and even though we do have the ability to be in several places at once, we don't feel like exercising that right now. So let's say goodnight. Fios 1 News, New Jersey and Long Island for me at the top of the hour.
And let me get this correct now. FiOS 1 News, Lower Hudson Valley for tonight at 10 o'clock. And then tomorrow in the early morning, if you care to get up and switch on, all of you Fire subscribers can watch Chief Meteorologist Brian Fitzgerald.
And Jeffrey Banson, who's on top of the world because Croatia won today against England. You know, just really fast, as I've been paying attention, we've been joking around in the newsroom. It's just, you know, watching soccer, they're all sitting around waiting for something to happen. And, you know, you would yell out, "Oh, something is about to happen," and then it wouldn't happen. But Croatia, they're a scrappy team. I really enjoyed watching them. So I'm with you, Jeffrey. I'll be rooting for Croatia in the final on Sunday. And
midday,
we've got Addison Green and Brittany Borer. Joe and I will be back tomorrow night, and we'll get you updated and get you all prepped up for the weekend. Have a great evening. We will see you tomorrow.
Bye.